Hello, dreamers, and welcome back to the Sand and Stars podcast. If you are just joining us, this is a podcast where we interview and have conversations with people who are doing different, interesting, incredible, fearless, and seemingly crazy things. We want to learn about what their motivations are, what lessons they have learned in their journey to the seemingly unknown. We want to inspire a generation to dare to dream, and I'm really excited for today's episode. We are talking, or rather I am having a conversation with Dean Gichukie. Now, who is Dean? Dean does a multitude of things. He's quite a guru, but in short, the profile that he sent. He is an experienced content producer with experience in games, films, and TV. And the conversation we're going to be having is about the development of African games. So Dean is the co-founder of Kunta Content, and they make great African games. And in their journey, this journey that has been going on, they've been awarded by Epic Games and Ubisoft, and they are one of the most promising studios from the African continent. So I'm really excited to learn about his journey and how this whole story began, because Dean doesn't have roots in any tech development or game development. In fact, he studied film and is a creative, and somehow found himself in the world of technology, and he does very many things, including this process of helping develop African games created by Africans for Africans, telling African stories. So let's get into it. So Dean, who are you? Who is Dean?
It's always the simple ones first.
It's always the simple ones. Who are you?
Hi, my name is Dean. I am a young man in Nairobi, Kenya. I am around anywhere from 25 to 40. And
you are a millennial?
Yes. I think, yes. You know, these terms got confused like 2 years ago when they added the Z and the X. And
millennials are, I think, from 1980... now, from 87. It's very confusing by the way. I just know I fall in the category of millennial. You know, there's Gen Zs, the 2000s babies. Those are Gen Zs.
Those were born in 2000 and...
Yes, I was born in 2011. What? Gosh, yeah.
Millennial. I don't know, figuring out this adulthood thing. Working mostly in tech. Started off in the creative industry, and enjoying these very calm times. There's nothing crazy happening in the world. There's no epidemics, no wars, nothing.
It's a good time
to be
alive.
Yeah, every month is December. Like, happy times.
All right, so Dean, of course, being African, it's like we're taught to be humble. But anyway, so Dean, when you say you started off in the creative space, what does that mean? Because Dean he's firmly in tech space, guys. Firmly in tech, but did not study anything to do with technology, and now finds himself working in startups and creating games and all these amazing things. So what are your roots? Like, where that creative side, what was that?
So I think it started, I'll try to go through it medium speed. I started off when I was pretty young. I used to like drawing. I was fairly an introvert, so drawing small cartoons and weird shapes and stuff. Then I got into a heavy reading phase, reading a lot of novels, fiction and fiction etc. Funny story, tried to write a novel when I was like 10, 11.
Wow.
I know. Funny enough, it was interesting peer pressure because there were like people older than me in the same school who are also trying it out, and they loved books. It was like, if these guys can, even me I can.
Even you can.
Yeah,
Why not?
Yeah. Then got into, fast forward like 3-4 years, got into acting. Thought I'd be an actor.
That's for drama festivals, the drama fests.
Funny enough, I started like really acting like in my 4th form.
Okay.
Yeah, so I missed that whole drama.
So you
thing.
missed all of that?
Yeah, I was in basketball. I was a sports guy.
Okay.
So got into acting. When I was done with high school, I went deep. I think I did like 50, 80 auditions in like the first year. Like, it was ridiculous.
No.
I know.
Did you get any?
Yeah. If you're sales-minded, the ratios in the creative industry are terrible. It's not... which family really reminded me, like, this energy you're putting, you did a biashara,
You would have
you have something. Yeah, I mean, so got into uni and studied film and theater.
Okay.
Which was interesting because there was the opportunity to study more, quote unquote, let me say, straightforward. Yeah, courses.
Not the business.
Yes.
Not law.
Yeah, funny enough, it was either at the time architecture or IT.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Irony.
I wish I did that IT thing. You see Google and Microsoft coming and
you're like,
one
of these things.
Yeah.
Now you're like,
it's okay.
I've got it in early.
We'll market for them. We'll tell them stories.
Mm.
Did the creative industry thing, got into the film industry, the creative side. In the first year or two, realized that there was barely an industry, like very few people doing anything significant, and by extension making any revenue that made it sustainable. So more and more got into the production and business side. You write a movie, you shoot a movie, then you try to get it seen. So you try to do a few events, film premieres and so on. Then that threw me almost completely into events. So doing a few corporate things, a few concerts here and there. I think it was over like a 3-year period. Did a ridiculous number of events, like, I don't know, 50, 60, something like that. Yeah, some mine, some for clients, etc. Then roughly at around that time, COVID landed. And like a month later, I was quite deep in tech. Like, I got
a month later?
Roughly. Like, this was April, end of May, I was in tech.
Oh.
Yeah, a game studio, and I was figuring out marketing. There were barely...
Wait, so you got into a game studio?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was figuring out, okay, how do you market a Kenyan game?
Yeah.
Like, what's the thought process? Like, where do you even start? There's no blueprint of any shape or form.
Yeah, because it's such virgin territory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So figuring that out, that's not even really the beginning of my history with the games, but that's like the creative story.
Okay.
At the same time, I was doing a bit of trainings around biz dev, marketing, and etc. Especially for small businesses and startups through Strathmore, accelerators, incubators, and etc. And long story short, that's how we get to today.
Well,
yeah.
So I love how people can just briskly turn around. It's like, oh yeah, I was doing events, and then I just joined a game studio. Next thing you know, I'm in technology, and then now I'm doing accelerator things with startups and small businesses.
Let me sweeten a little then.
Sweeten.
There's an event I was organizing, March 2020.
Okay. Fresh. When it was all at the beginning. Yeah. Call it at the beginning.
It was a rough one. It was for a client, and I remember the event was on March 14th.
Wow.
March 13th at, I think it was 2 p.m. The government announced closure of all public spaces.
Wow.
Oh, they also mentioned events, but it was generally closure of
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah. So that was like, I think it was less than 12 hours too. The most expensive, ridiculous, stressful event. It is. I hadn't been paid for. I still haven't been paid, by the way. Bit salty, but
Wow.
it's okay. So I think that sped up my movement away from events, and even before then, I was fairly concerned with the sustainability of most events.
Yeah.
It's not, again, a very stable, sustainable industry on its own. Especially if you're just organizing events. If you have a platform, if you're powering technology, if you're offering equipment, etc., it's a bit more stable because you're able to figure out revenues and etc.
Yeah.
But if you're doing the B2C, if you're getting Kenyans to work in, it's rough.
B2C for any model
Yes.
is a headache.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And please share your B2C experience.
This is not my story.
Soon to come. So that's the short of how I got into tech. It's figuring out, okay, this one isn't working. Instead of beating it over the head, let's sort of evolve. And then I was interested in games for a very long time. Since I was a kid, I was playing PlayStation. I was a big fan of Scarface, which, just like the movie, is extremely vulgar and just a rough experience for a 7-8-year-old.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it
Trauma.
was
PTSD.
too many curse words landed in the psyche. Too many. So yeah, I think back then there was, you're not aware of, like, there's a thing like Africans don't have representation.
Yeah.
Like it hasn't
You don't
landed.
know what you don't know.
Yes. So back then there wasn't any of that. But the older I grew, the more stories I created, especially as a filmmaker. There was the question of, but I really like games. Why isn't there an African game? And then I think I spent like a week of research trying to figure out games. And it was like, this thing is too complicated. This is like 8-9 years ago.
Wow.
But the main title we are currently working on was sort of born that time, where it was this Maasai action-adventure game where you travel across East Africa protecting wildlife, elephants and etc., and then attacking poachers and stuff.
Wow.
So it's action, rough, a bit bloody just to make it fun, and mostly discovery of just African landscape. So it's beautiful skies, beautiful grass, interesting animals, very familiar. Like you see the village, you're like, I've been to a village like that.
Yeah,
like that's so familiar. Yeah.
The blueprint for all villages. So you see it, you're like, I have.
All Maasai villages.
All Maasai villages.
Yes.
All right, so now we're getting into the game, right? So that's who Dean is. It's a whole mix, guys. Just flow with it. All right, so you find yourself working in this game. What did we call it?
Game studio.
Right? So you're working in the game studio. You're helping them figure out marketing and what have you.
Yeah.
This is not you creating the games yet.
Yeah.
So how did it evolve from that? Mind you, Dean is also CMO for?
Karma Chain, yes.
Say it again.
CARMA Chain.
Karma Chain.
Yes, Nyororo.
All right, Nyororo. Karma Chain, which is an amazing tech startup that's figuring out how to change the narrative for lending.
Yes, figure out just better lending infrastructure.
All right, so that's we are calling it day job.
Yes, job. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All right, so you're doing this now, okay, and that before you were doing the game studio.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's not talk about the day job. Let's talk about the game. So you're doing game studio, but you're not yet started creating your game.
Yeah.
So how did you get into this whole world of actually creating the games?
So I had a few ideas over the years, but just that thing, it's in a Dropbox somewhere.
Yeah. After you had done research and you're like, it's too complex. I don't know if I want to do this. But then
there was a document that hadn't been modified for a few years. It was just there. But the more conversations I was in before, or really how I got into games, was that I'd been just overall figuring out business models within entertainment and the content industry, because all the work I was doing, all the clients I had were really deep in that side and figuring out, okay, how do you deliver stable revenue, sustainability, etc., etc. So figuring out merchandise, figuring out subscriptions, figuring out interactive content and so on. So I got more and more interested in games, figuring out how to make games, etc. Because the revenue just globally in games is ridiculous.
It's sick.
It's also super difficult to make one. But at the same time, people generally love games. It's not really, it's a weird taboo subject. In that when you say gamer, the picture that lands in people's minds is a geek in a basement somewhere, even in Kenya, really.
Yeah, I mean, generally, you know, as Africans, games are associated with playing, and playing is associated with not being serious.
Yes.
So imagine talking to your African parents to tell them, I'm a gamer. They're like, you're a what? Don't go back to business school. Quickly. Yeah.
Which is interesting. Let me surprise you with this stat. The largest demographic of gamers. In fact, guess. Largest demographic of gamers.
Well, Africa.
Globally.
I would have assumed it was Asia.
Gender.
Male. Gender male. We're doing demos.
Yeah, we're guessing.
We're guessing.
Yes.
Between the ages of, since you said you started at like 7 or 8, so let's say between the ages of 7 to 40, honestly, because it never ends.
So, yes, there is a fairly strong audience with that side. But the largest single demographic is ladies.
No.
For real.
Really?
For real.
Wow, you learn something new every day.
Anywhere from, what's the best age? I think the best age was 15 to like 45.
You want to tell me this gamer industry that we feel as though it's very male dominated, the end user is the largest percentage is female? Wow, shook.
Candy Crush.
Wow. Is that why? That one game changed the demographic for a whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And by extension, there are a few other games that are similar.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, like
hairstyling games.
Gardenscape. I kid you not. I play Gardenscape a lot. There's CG Homescape, whatnot, and I'm on a CG level 1000 and something. I've been playing it for like 3 years.
How many hours a day?
Oh, I go through seasons. So I have a season where I spend at least 1 hour every day, and then I go blackout because my life gets busy and I completely forget about it for months on end. And then I have like a whole intense 2 months where
Of the new season.
like I'm like this and I'm sitting. If my hands are idle and I'm not doing anything, there we are. Yeah.
So you might find, yes, there's still a community of male gamers. It's getting more and more sparse. You find there are some small communities of guys who play a lot of games, like 3-4 hours a day. But then how it extends to the larger male population isn't that much. Versus with ladies, it stretches a bit better across the female population.
Wow.
Yeah, so you might find like the average gamer who plays games, who's a guy, might do 4 hours a day. But the average lady generally might do 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So when you stretch that,
we're structured. They're like, 20 minutes because we have to do what? We have several things that are lined up that we actually need to get done.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Okay, getting back to that. So you had this Dropbox, all this research. You're doing a lot of research and you're working with a lot of organizations or startups or businesses that are in the space of like gaming, content, marketing, figuring out how to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
All right, so now this comes together with your Dropbox.
Yes.
What happens next?
Yeah, so it started a bit organically. Spoke to a friend of mine who had an interesting game idea, mobile game, and character-based, trying to tell a story through the mobile platform. A bit rough, but what that did is that it planted a seed.
Okay.
And as you were figuring out what the structure might be and etc., just at the back of my mind, I was like, wait, there's a file somewhere.
For like 2 months. I was interested in.
Yeah, for like 2 months. I didn't even open. I was just like, where is it, by the way? Anyway, let's continue the meeting, etc. Yeah, so finally opened it up. Thought it was still fairly interesting. 8 years later, a lot of growth later, thought, okay, it still has some legs.
Yeah.
Just started having conversations with a few developers I knew.
Because now you're in the tech space, and the tech space has what? Tech people, developers.
Yes. And you'll find, in fact, really, for most developers I meet, even outside of games, a good number of them, their starting point was games. Like they started playing games on their own.
That was their interaction with technology.
Yeah. A few of them.
It's a gateway drug to technology.
Yes. In fact, it's ridiculous how strong that drug is. Like it's super strong. And I think small survey for everyone. Just talk to any developer you know, and figure out their relationship with the games. You might find a few surprises. Even the serious ones, the banker ones, the ones dealing in fintech. Games started in games. And then I started figuring out, okay, games are rough. Like the day job at the time was figuring out games. So games are rough. How do you figure out how to make money? And this is where I think the earlier conversation around builder comes in, where my thought process usually is create something that people really want, then you figure out how to get it to them later. And it's the product versus.
This is it's in your blood. Find the market, get it to the people.
Yes. So figuring out, it's the product versus distribution, that process. So distribution is sometimes where people go too fast, sometimes people go product first, but the challenge is they don't really marry them that well together. And by extension, distribution is a business model and how you make money and all that stuff. So figuring that out, and the estimation I made was that it might be rough to figure out even how to turn anything close to a profit, but in the long term, it's something fairly viable, especially if it's doesn't have to generate revenue on day one or day 100 or day 300 etc.
It was a mind shift of aligning your expectation with reality.
Yes.
And not expecting that, just seeing the difficulty because expecting this thing is hard to make money and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
how do you make it?
Dismissing all of that, and then just deciding to start. So the starting was you started having conversations with developers, and then
and then of course now the business stuff, the business research, figuring out, okay, is there any other African studio that has done anything similar that's interesting? Okay, there's barely any. Okay, is there any American studio that's black that has told a story that connects to the audience we think is interesting for us? Okay, there's a sort of path there, but not strong enough. Okay, is there any other piece of content? And at around that time, it was 2 years after Black Panther. Which was this scenario of, okay, yes, there's the Marvel Disney advantage, but there is just some overall general interest in
African stories.
Yes.
And portrayal of Africans as heroes within the stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I also like to connect it to the whole Netflix phenomenon, where you can have what are supposed to be really tiny shows from semi-tiny regions of the world that become these global things.
Huge phenomenon.
Yes.
Where, in fact, I like to say that I appreciate Netflix so thoroughly because it has introduced the world to diversity in terms of film, and just realizing, by the way, there are storytellers around the world that are not American or British. I'm like, the way I love Portuguese things, guys, now. And tell me about Asian films. They are, I think, the excellence with which they tell their stories. So on any given day, in fact, my Netflix is, in fact, people laugh at me because it's like you have Spanish, you have Korean, you have Chinese, you have Portuguese,
Filipino.
and then I'm not going into Filipino yet. I'm
Oh
not.
no.
I
Oh
need
no. It's
to.
coming.
My God, let me tell you. And then now you have like one English speaking show thrown in there, you know?
Netflix trying to force you.
It's like,
try.
Have a look at this. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, fine, I'll watch Grace and Frankie because I really enjoy it, because it is also a different story than the usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I digress.
No. Completely agree. So shows like Money Heist, Narcos, right now Bridgerton, Squid Game, just basically sold the potential that a tiny thing from a tiny region could potentially become
huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think just as important is that people were actively interested in something that they hadn't seen before. Like there's doom scrolling on Netflix. Like you just scroll forever. Like there's nothing.
You're exhausted. You're like, there's nothing to watch.
Yeah.
You're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because everything just looks the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that coming to Africa moment is sort of happening now. And I think it's the opportunity for so many creators, even people who don't consider themselves creators, to be creators, start a show, a business, a podcast, etc. Because yes, there is a lot of interest, but it's, I don't think, ever been stronger.
Yeah.
And more people looking for authenticity. They are not really interested in someone from a different region coming to this region and telling our story for us. They're more interested in, okay, but is this truly authentic? Yeah.
All right.
So that coming together sort of made the case that this is something that is potentially viable and you can figure it out over time.
Yeah. So you, the person who wants to understand how things work and whatnot, you're like, wait, no, there's this thing is possible because there is interest. There's an actual market out there for African content, African games, African gaming. All right. So now you have this whole catalyst moment. Yeah. But how do you take it from catalyst moment? Because you've already been sitting on a Dropbox for years. So how do you take that and now turn it into what you are currently doing and actually actively, proactively, like it's a real thing now being created on the ground?
I think I was incredibly fortunate to meet colleagues, team members, partners, even co-founders really, who are even more passionate about games than I was at the time, who, like, you have a conversation, you're like, there's this game, this is what I think it's going to be, this is what I'm trying to do, this is the journey, etc., what do you think? And the excitement and the interest, and even the steps taken after that conversation are exciting and challenging to us.
Okay.
There's a joke we have in the team that all you need is one person to like really push, that everyone else feels there's no way we can like disappoint that person. I think the equivalent will be, I don't know, someone building a 20-story tower, like beautiful steel in upper hill, etc. And then as an interior designer, you walk in and you do a basic job. Like, because the architect, engineer, etc. built something so amazing, there's a bit of responsibility on
there
you
is
to
responsibility to live up to it.
Yes.
You've already done this. There's no way that I can come and just do a half baked.
Yeah.
And
it's
guys,
not
you've
even,
had, there is now a team, but we'll get there. All right, so you're having conversations with people and it's challenging conversations where there are actual steps and actions towards those conversations. What do those actions look like?
I think step one, and this comes to back to the builder thing, where there, I think, always needs to be a fairly strong vision owner, not a dictator, just a vision owner who figures out, okay, this is what I think this thing is, and then is able to bring people along for the journey.
Okay.
And I think it's so important in the early stages that it is as much unencumbered by reality as possible, that if possible don't have to pay bills as a result of this work you're doing. It's not 8 hours a day type scenario. It's you have a breathing moment, maybe over 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, where you can really go through this thought process. Like, okay, this is the 8 years thing, but even before truly starting, there was like a 2-month period where it was just mentally like going through the motions. And for me, it's usually just asking myself questions to make sure this thing is, you're not lying to yourself. I think that's the key. You're not telling yourself this thing is interesting.
But it's not.
Yeah, but you'll just talk to someone on the street and they're like, hey, but that sucks. Yeah, you need to have that thought process. And that hopefully increases your confidence, your understanding, I think, even more. That when you start communicating to other people, they can get a sense that it's not 100%,
but they're
it's
able
developing.
to understand and buy into the vision.
Yes.
So you are the vision bearer.
Yes.
Right? All right. So vision bearer milled through, he went through the thought process of, I'm not crazy, this is what it is.
Yeah.
So that you have the confidence.
Yeah.
So that now when you're trying to tell someone about it, it's not wishy-washy.
Yes.
So they actually believe in, this thing is interesting, it's not crazy.
Yeah.
I want in. I want
Yes.
in on this.
Yeah.
All right. So you went through that process and then now started building the team, or how did it look like?
So I think it was sort of overlapping a little with especially the first 2 colleagues to come on board. It sort of overlapped where the story was fairly developing and growing, and we could do this. At the same time, we were already building it. We were already doing the blockouts, which is like the template type thing. It's like the framework, the wireframes. If that's familiar.
Yeah.
Yes. So figuring, okay, this is the skeleton. This
Like
is what
storyboarding.
Exactly. And bringing people on board and saying, so this is the vision. This is the step 1, and then this is the storyboard. So this is how we are going through this process.
So at this point, you already have like guys who are like, yeah, let's play around with
Yes.
this. Let's meet it out, flesh it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Aha, okay.
And figuring out, yes, there's the vision, but I am not a believer in absolutes, especially when it comes to other people being involved.
Yeah.
Because I think for a project to become truly interesting and new, you need to sort of break up small parts of the vision and fully trust them to other people.
Biteable.
Yes. And so many of the most interesting technologies ever built, there was always that one guy in the team who did one tiny thing that changed it by like 20%.
Everything.
Yeah. Like, to segue, like I think the guy who built the iPhone keyboard was almost just someone who was recently an intern, like 2-3 months ago was an intern, etc. Built out this amazing keyboard that we all love today, that you like seems to know what you're about to say, and etc. So being able to trust small parts of the project with other people, and then being able to come to you and say, I think we should make it like this. And I think for so many vision bearers, the first instinct is to say no. That takes away from the vision. And being part of creative projects, I've seen it too much to want to do it myself.
Yeah.
So it's to say, okay, how does that look like? Like actually legitimately entertaining it. And sometimes you'll say no, sometimes you'll say yes, and you're able to also justify your decisions. And so many times people say, because I said it, it has to be, without even internally like, this is how it makes sense for me, what do you think? Yeah. So having that happen, and then trying to build it out as we go along, evolving from, initially it was mostly about grazing cows, that we thought would be interesting, with some fighting here and there. Then we were like, hey, but not 5 hours of grazing cows. I mean, is that really fun?
It's not fun, but okay, wait, because we have progressed quite a bit, please remind guys what the game is about.
Oh, okay.
Remind guys what this game that you have been building is about. Yeah.
Okay. So you play as a Maasai. In hindsight, it's not as fun. But then also it's part of the process, in that you might, like, we started off thinking of it as a short prototype to figure out something that is small, playable, etc.
Yeah.
And then hopefully expand it.
Okay.
So even in the prototype stage, you are like, yeah, this grazing thing is nice, but we won't have it in the long term.
Okay.
But even saying, even in this prototype, do we
want to to just graze cows in the game?
Yeah. Grazing cows is hard. Hey.
I mean, it is, but okay, it's the equivalent of like doing a gardening app or I don't know, or like a horse wrangling app. Anyway, continue. So the game is about.
So you play as a Maasai warrior. It's called HIRU, and you go on this epic adventure of revenge across Africa.
Oh wow! Why?
So your family and clan is massacred.
Oh no!
By a gang of poachers.
Whoa!
Because you and your people were protecting a herd of elephants from these poachers.
I'm feeling emotional. Okay, I love elephants so much. Continue.
I won't spoil too much, but so you go on this journey. Poaching is a cross-continental organized crime thing. There's this story from, I think, 3-4 years ago where a gang of poachers was caught. I think it was in Somalia.
Yeah.
And the tusks they had were from Botswana.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, so there's an ocean up or karibu na Botswana. Where are you? Like,
where are you? Across the continent.
Yeah. So you go on this journey from the plains of East Africa to the forests of the Congo, to the Namibia desert, to Kilimanjaro. So it's this truly epic African story.
Wow. So he's hunting poachers?
Yes.
Oh, is there like a kingpin poacher that he's heading towards?
Yes.
The
bad
Aku
guy. Yeah.
Of
yes.
of poachers.
Yes.
Guys, if you know, Samurai Jack.
Yeah. Aku was kind of funny sometimes though.
Hey, Aku.
You'd say some funny things.
Excellent. In fact, I need to rewatch Samurai Jack.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, fantastic. So that's the game. So how far has the game gone so far? And how long have you and the team who have been working on this? Mind you guys, it's not like they're being paid to do this. Are you guys being paid to do this?
We are paying ourselves. We got a grant. Well, we won a prize.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. So you won a prize.
Yeah.
Guys, you can create games and win prizes.
Yeah, we won a prize about 4 months ago. And what it did is that we were able to just get a bit more flexibility with budgets, able to get high quality equipment.
Oh, before the 4 months, how long was it before you got the grant?
About 11 months, I think.
Almost a year.
Yeah. So how we build it, which really speaks to just that thought process around time, is that how we build it is that we are all working on it 3, maybe maximum 10 hours a week. Usually in our own focus points or cocoons. So the artist might need to build a character, spends like a week or 2, has fun with it, etc., then presents it to the rest of the guys, and then we are able to say, okay, yeah, this we like this, we don't like this, etc. So what that does, I think, is that we all have our job. Like, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Because
you're spending majority of your time actually doing the thing versus meetings and follow-ups and etc.
Where ideas go to die.
Yeah. So it's been a fairly exciting journey, and we anticipate we'd be done with it by potentially mid to end next year. The hope is to sell it for about $15. A few 100,000 people around the world were interested in African stories, and specifically, I think the journey of someone who technically doesn't have a good shot at making it outside his current cocoon, because this is 1980s East Africa. Like, if you are a herdsman, etc., transversing across the continent was possible, just a bit rough. There's a lot of violence, crime, coups, government, weirdness, etc. Not formally educated, just has, what do we call it? This natural education.
Natural education.
Yes. understands the law of the land, understands plants, animals, etc. But everything else is by the wind, sort of.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So so a key thing I'm also getting from this is for all those who would want to create a game, or it's the persistence to do so, and these things it's not like you wake up and you work on something and it's good to go the next day. It takes time.
Yeah.
So that excellence takes time.
Yeah.
And dedication and effort and love for what you do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's, I think also because we have a bit of fun with it, there's that love and protection for it. But I'd say it is possible just generally to move faster, and I think most people should move faster, especially if you're starting out with something creative.
Yeah. So that you're not overtaken by events.
Yes, and you're also not learning enough to make sure you're learning enough. Because the team has been in games just individually for a while. I've been creating a lot of creative projects over the last couple of years. So success and failure are familiar friends, so to say. Like, we've been there before, we've done this before, etc. So even if, quote unquote, this doesn't work out, for us it's not wasted time, wasted energy. We are learning so much, we're having fun. It's already becoming in its own way rewarding, from not just the energy standpoint, but also financially. But most importantly is that you sort of have to put the hours in. You need to understand something deeper than almost anyone else in the world, especially your game, your project, your company. Yeah. So it does help when you put in the time, especially if you think you're locked into it long term. But it is important to have a lot of failure points. Like, it's been a year and about 4 or 5 months. In that time we've done like 5 different prototypes.
Wow.
Yeah, just internally, show it to a few friends, give us feedback, etc. So we aren't, quote unquote, publicly succeeding or failing, but in our own cocoon, it is happening. Yeah. Like, there's certain struggles we're figuring out how to solve. Technology is shifting. What we're able to do now is very different from even 4 or 5 months ago. The pace is
drastic.
ridiculous.
Drastically changing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure. So for your game, is it console based or phone, or how would I play it?
So HIRU is PC console.
Are you rolling it VR? I'm like, I have so many questions.
The hope will be eventually, of course, to have it on as many platforms as possible. Right now we are focused on PC console. It's also a bit of a challenge to us in that there are barely any high quality African games on PC console.
Okay.
Yeah, even mobile, there are very few. At last estimate, there are about 500 games.
Wow.
Yeah, made by Africans in Africa. Compare that to like 2 million games.
I know.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's such an untapped area, generally, and I think it's also because of how we were cultured to think about what you are able to do and what you're not able to do, and what adds value to the world. Yeah. So you're taught that only specific careers add value to the world, but I'm like, hey, games add a lot of value to the world. Yeah. Right. Wow, that's really, really interesting. So now, like, for you, for your, I don't know, friends, family, parents, whatnot, you tell them, hey guys, we had a good week this week. The game is going well. Yeah. Like, so have you had a conversation about the gaming, right? Not even our gen understands. Like the older generation. Yeah. And how does that look like? And what questions do they ask?
So I think for me, because it isn't the first creative project, I've had those conversations before. Yeah. On many different other things. So I understand how to
navigate.
Yeah. And then I think African parents right now are fairly straightforward. Like, they just want you to succeed, make money, etc.
Yeah, how you do it is not.
Yes, of course, they will prefer if you are all doctors. Yeah. That year was heavy.
Yeah, but no, me, I've never been told, there's never been any dictation as to what I should be.
Okay.
Ever.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm like, in fact, I think I was very lucky at that point. Mine is a long story.
So previously the experience was I think there's just generally a lack of understanding across both people. Like, we don't understand where our parents are coming from.
Yeah.
And there's the whole thing of, they want you to be successful, make money, etc. Recently, I realized more and more it's also a thing of prestige. They want to show you off to their friends, family, etc.
Yeah.
So they are fully aware that we are working on a game. But even what I do for a living, day job and etc., still don't fully understand.
Same for me. I told my mom to just introduce me and say she's in tech. Because for a while there were several things flying around. Like, just say I'm in tech. So like, yeah, she's in tech. Okay, all right, so I get it.
Yeah.
Right, so honestly, I think that I feel like I can just sit here and ask questions, but I'm like, guys, I know attention span inakuanga ngumu. So we can wrap up. Oh my God, it's been like an hour. So I think that's it, and we've covered everything, honestly. The who, what, where, when, and why. And also lessons. You've also shared quite a bit in there. I thought this was going to be more about games, but I feel like it's been more about the process of tackling a new thing that you had thought of, and you had thought, and packed it away, and then unpacked it and actually did something towards it.
Yeah.
And the game is really interesting. I'm going to be kind. If you want to test prototypes, just share.
I'll come to you.
I will give you feedback, and I will test honestly. I think that's it. So before we leave, Dean, any last minute, any last comments? Your business say A or B, any other business?
Is the agenda done? That's a heavy one.
Yeah, actually, don't start a new one. Last one.
Okay, so I think humanity started off.
No,
I promise it's
we
right.
refused.
So I was listening to this really interesting breakdown yesterday that as humanity we started off very singular and solo. It was almost always one solo hunter, one solo gatherer somewhere, the caveman days, providing for himself, for their small family. Then we got into industrialization, where it's one person in a company of 10,000, 1,000 etc. And now we are sort of slowly going back into the solo thought process, where one person can have a fairly successful business on their own, whether tech, whether real world etc., whether consulting and so on. So I think there's never been a better time for you to build whatever it is you would like to build, because even the most complicated tools are becoming ridiculously simple right now. So that thing that you've always wanted to do, just try. Just do the tiniest version of it possible.
Thank you for listening to the end of the Sand and Stars podcast. Really excited to have been with you in this episode, and I hope that you got inspired, you learned something that you probably had no idea about. So if you know anyone who is doing something that is out of the norm, interesting, impactful, very, very different, something that no one would ever think about, go ahead and share the details with me. You can email me at mbithakingori@gmail.com. It's also in the description, and we can get them on the podcast. Super excited to share the next episode with you, so stick on.